Ladies and gentlemen, again, it's not working. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your moderator for the next session, Alena Kudzko.
Good morning, everyone. It's already not good morning. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us. I know that many of you must have caught the previous session at the Albright stage with Minister Fedorov, so you're prepped up for the panel and have an idea about what we're talking about. At this panel today, we're going to be talking about tech frontiers, solving for the next challenge. And what we want to do is to talk about things that already have an impact right now, give you a landscape of technologies that are already being developed and being applied in various fields, but also thinking about what's next. What are the things that we're maybe not thinking about right now, or maybe some of the things that are under the radar, but we need to be paying more attention to. And for that, I would like to welcome on the stage a fantastic panel. First and foremost, we have with us Valeriya, Ionan, who is Deputy Minister at the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine. Welcome. Hello. We also have with us Joakim Reiter, Chief External and Corporate Affairs Officer at Vodafone. Welcome, Joakim. And we have with us Denis Mercier, who is Helsing board member, but he is also a General Chief of the French Air Force, currently retired, and former Supreme Allied Commander Transformation and NATO. Welcome, General. The reasons why we wanted to have this panel is twofold. First, you probably noticed that the theme of the entire conference is the global competition. The way how technologies are increasingly part of the global contestation and what kind of role Europe can play in this contestation. But second part, we look at technology as the way to address some of the challenges that we're facing now, be it the issue with productivity in Europe or the issue how to increase competitiveness, but also the quality of life in Europe and beyond. And I want to dive straight into the questions. And Minister Ionan, I will start with you. You're coming from Ukraine. It's hard to imagine a place right now where the future is so much accelerated and in many ways where the future is colliding with the past. You have a lot of innovation happening on the ground, both in civilian sector, but also in defense sector. You do something that few countries do, meaning you take what's out there, apply it in fast and very innovative ways, and you do it on a daily basis. Can you give us a brief snapshot? What you think are the most important things that you are developing or applying in Ukraine right now that you think will be fundamental for the way how Ukraine will look like in the future?
Well, thank you so much for this question. First of all, good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen. So basically, we are building the most convenient digital state in Ukraine. And Ukraine has been called the European Digital Transformation Tiger, and we are very proud of this. And basically, since 2019, the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine was created as a response to President Zelensky's promise to build a state in a smartphone. And for these 5 years, we have created and achieved, a bunch of very successful digital reforms. For example, we have created our DIA ecosystem, which the cornerstone of this ecosystem states Super App DIA, which is used by 20 million of Ukrainians. So we have 19 digital documents in the app, more than 30 digital services, digital signature. Ukrainians are able to receive digital services just in a few clicks, and they have been able to do so even before the full-scale Russian invasion. And then we have a state portal of public services DIA, which is also a part of the ecosystem. We are trying to digitize all of the services. Like, for example, we have the fastest business registration in the world, so you can register your business online in Ukraine only in 10 minutes. Then we have DIA Education, which is a national edutainment platform for reskilling and digital literacy, which is free to everyone. Because if you want to build the most convenient digital state, you definitely need that your citizens have at least basic level of digital literacy, and better, not basic and higher. And then we have DIA Engine, which is a low-code open-source platform for creation of state registries, and DIA City, which is the best tax regime, and DIA Business, the project for the development of SMEs. And now we are about to launch our new groundbreaking application, which is called Mrija, translated as a dream, which is the governmental application for education based on AI. Now it is piloted in 40 schools, and we plan to scale it since this autumn already. And of course, we had a lot of other, great reforms, like, for example, the creation of a position of Chief Digital Transformation Officer, CDTO. So today we have more than 50 CDTOs assigned in different ministries or regional councils. So basically, these are people who are responsible for digital transformation in their institutions or in their regions, and they're helping us to driving digital transformation forward. So what we have done for this, and that's like a very, very small part of what we have done, but that's the fundament. That's the fundamental things which give us an opportunity to move further. Now we are sharing our experience with the world, and we are working with different countries and sharing the experience of DIA as a state super app and DIA ecosystem as well. But what's important here is not just tools, it's not just instruments, it's not just concrete emerging technologies. It's the vision. When you are doing anything, you need to have the vision. For digital transformation, we have the vision that we want to build the most convenient digital state in the world, which will be, corruption-less, paperless, which will help our citizens to optimize their time, optimize their resources. When it comes to our innovation strategy, we just cannot afford to lose. We need to innovate because we need to strengthen our economy. We need to win the war on the battlefield. We need to help our citizens. And recently we have presented our global Ukrainian innovation vision called Win-Win, which is basically has 3 parts, so 3 pillars. It's the Ukrainian innovation ecosystem, and then the support of this ecosystem and priority directions where Ukraine has to invest in order to make a huge economic leap. And among those directions, we do have, of course, defense tech, and we are doing a lot on that side. We have an army of drones. We are developing the unmanned ground platforms. We've done a lot of actions on the legal side. We've made the procedures we've opened the market for businesses, and I can definitely tell hours about this. We have also created a Brave One, which is defense tech cluster, and which unites Ukrainian businesses and startups and gives them the possibility to share their products, their ideas, and not just to share, but also to test on the battlefield, and then to make sure that they work. So we have this approach that we're not just talking about the emerging technologies and that they might be helpful someday. That's not our situation. That's not our approach. We are looking at digital transformation and innovations as for the tool, as a daily tool, without which we basically cannot move forward. So that's about digital transformation, GovTech, partnership between governments, private sector, civil society, innovation, everything which relates to tech. Defense tech, med tech, ed tech, and then AI, secure cyberspace, and then you name it. But that's all important things. For med tech, for example, the daily situations in Ukraine, it's all the time Russian missile attacks. And for example, we need to find different innovative solutions for regenerating skin, for bionic prosthetics, for mental health, and for many other things. So we right now are opening for ourselves the whole new world of the technology, which we are using and implementing on a daily basis. I'll stop here because I could talk hours. Sorry for that.
Thank you so much, Valeriya, for giving us a fantastic overview of the full spectrum of things, what you can do with technology, including in the ways where maybe even in Europe we don't think enough about it. For example, talking about the medical issue. But I want to go to Joakim first. Valeriya was talking about this idea of the digital state and how everything is connected. We have a lot of similar discussions in Europe, and of course, people like pointing out that, of course, on the one hand, we not do that well in making sure that everything is digital. digital. But if we think about the future, people would often point out that telecom is the digital backbone that would be indispensable for the future of connectivity. Can you give us your assessments as Vodafone, but also as the person who's been both in diplomacy and tech in the past? How do you see these issues? What's important for you right now, and in which direction this innovation in broadband connectivity in Europe is going to go?
So I think if I start with, in Europe, there's often never a lack of vision documents and mission statements. I think the Ukrainian contrast is one of, let's get our hands dirty and sandbox it and trial it and pilot and experiment and dare to take risk in doing so. And so it's very inspirational to listen to Ukraine, not only leveraging what is already out there, because there's a lot already out there, but then trying to, in a concerted way, drive that. And I think in Europe, we're still struggling with the mobilization. It's still viewed as a sector. Digitization or telecom is viewed as a sector, as opposed to a horizontal platform upon which you then drive the competitiveness, productivity, or quality of life of all sectors, all segments of society. So I think what I really like, I mean, from a Vodafone perspective, Vodafone is quite big. I mean, it's not a small company. We're sort of over the whole value chain. If I divide it into three categories, and I'm not going to be super polite about the categories, but let's category number one, I would describe as brick and mortar. Because while we still have massive challenges on, say, moving SMEs into utilizing cloud-related tools, or closing digital divides for rural, allowing sensor technology for improving agricultural productivity, frankly, all of that is fully available. You know, there will always be new innovations, new applications that sits on top of the infrastructure in the current applications, but it's largely brick and mortar. You know, how you move, and just to call out something really positive, you do things under extraordinary, grievous circumstances. But in Europe, we went through COVID-19, and in the process of going through COVID-19, that was our biggest crisis, if you want. You know, NHS probably digitized faster during those 18 months of the first 2 waves of COVID than it did in the prior 2 decades. So Europe is capable of accelerating. So in the brick and mortar, in the application, we are seeing that there is a huge demand. COVID learning in terms of the benefits of digitalization is now much more widespread, and there is a large uptake, and that covers everything from delivery of public services, you referred to that obviously, closing the digital gap between large companies and small companies, which is a big productivity problem in Europe. Large companies are very tech savvy, small companies are struggling to access plug-and-play solutions on technology. And then basic infrastructure, you know, we still have some holes to close in terms of rural connectivity and stuff like that, which we're working on. But that's all known. We can criticize that we're not doing enough, but it's all known what we need to do. Then the second layer I would describe what Vodafone is really engaged in is what I call, how do we leverage mass adoption of leapfrog technology? And for us in telco, that's 5G standalone. 5G standalone, which sounds very technical, is super simple. 5G standalone will be for the industrial sector what 4G was for the entire consumer market. Remember the time when you had to travel, say, to Prague to go to a GLOBSEC conference, and you had to call a travel agent, right? That's still today how many industries are dealing with digitization. So with 5G standalone and low latency, we will basically put a full application of industrial internet that will have the same effect that the arrival of smartphone-enabled digital-first applications did for the consumer retail sector. That's a leapfrog moment from the point of view of productivity and competitiveness. Now, the bad news is Europe is far, far behind on it. We were the world champions of mobile telephony technology. We're now a laggard, not compared to China and the US on 5G standalone alone, because we're clearly laggard against them. We're a laggard against middle-income economies. You know, last time I checked, Bangkok has a better 5G network than the best performing European capital. So we're not talking, you know, Shanghai or, you know, New York here. We're talking Bangkok. So there is a real challenge that Europe has not leaned into the leapfrog moment that is provided by very high capacity network, the modernization, and the fact that that provides an entirely new platform by which all sectors will innovate new applications. So when we talk about Industry 4.0 or automated factories, that's basically driven by low latency robotization. And for that, you need, unless you build a mobile private network, you're going to need to have 5G standalone in the public network. So that's something that we deploy a lot of emphasis on right now, but we're doing it with heavy lifting in Europe. Luckily, there's an increasing understanding of the fact that Europe is faced with a very significant handicap for its overall competitiveness unless it resolves this fundamental issue. Final thing that Vodafone works very heavily on is that we lean into frontier technologies. Again, we're not sort of the cutting-edge innovators on this. What we are masters on is spotting something and saying, how do we bring it to mass market? Telcos, and it's not only true for Vodafone, Deutsche, Telefonica, Orange, we're world champions in bringing things to the masses. So if you want mass adoption, telcos are the ones usually to fix it. So where do we look then in frontier for future mass adoption? For sure, Open RAN, which sounds very technical, but it's basically to separate hardware, general purpose hardware, and make it entirely software defined. So think Tesla multiplied by 100. So where the braking of a Tesla is not defined by the braking system of the car, but it's dependent on the software that Tesla provides that generates the effect on the braking. Now, we will construct networks. It doesn't matter which type of networks. Everything will be constructed by the separation of software and hardware. That's a revolution within our industry, and it provides an entirely different way of dynamically upgrading. If you think about moving from 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G, 5G standalone, and I hear politicians talk about 6G, we won't have 6G in my view. We will have 5.1G, 5.2G, 5.4G, and it will be all by software upgrades. The vision we have is to separate the hardware from the software. And we're working with all of our peers in the industry and leading tech firms in driving that to happen. Second thing is, of course, mass scale adoption of generative AI. In the use cases, we discuss a lot about large language models in the cutting edge research of it. Actually, it's in the mass adoption in the use cases that we see an enormous potential and a risk. So how responsible telcos make that technology available to corporates for improving their productivity while ensuring all the downsides is going to be a very big challenge for us as a company. Quantum is something where Vodafone together with IBM leads a cross-industry alliance on trying to deal with safe quantum encryption. That's something that we are really worried about and something we deploy quite a lot of effort to make sure that all communications is ultimately about confidentiality of communications, and people need to trust that. And the final thing, which sounds a bit weird, we're sort of an Earth-based network, is we see over the next few years a merger of space technology with terrestrial networks. And that the revolution lies in direct to mobile. So you have worked with Starlink. I know Olga very well from Vodafone Ukraine, and we discussed how you use Starlink solutions. I'm amazed how they do it. But Starlink is basically a box. The real revolution will be when we don't have to change anything on the ground. We put flying base stations up in space. That means that no one has to change their phone. You don't have to have a satellite phone. You don't have to have special chips in it. You can use any damn phone, even if you bought it 3 years ago, and you will still be able to have coverage everywhere on the planet through low orbit satellites. And there is a space race going on together with operators in that area, which is an area that Vodafone has strong belief in. It's not going to be the world's best network. It's not going to be the industrial internet, but it's going to resolve very fundamental challenges that we have as communities. For example, the Turkish earthquake, where frankly, we were struggling as Vodafone to identify the people that needed to be rescued under the ruins of the buildings, because the network was down. And usually you can use a mobile signal to try to identify them. If the network's down, you can't. But if we would have relied on direct-to-mobile satellite communication, our ability to respond to emergencies, war situations would be fundamental. Wildfires, floods, as well as address the last unconnected people on the planet, that would be revolutionized. So these are some of the more frontier technologies. It's not super tech. Actually, all of them are within the realm of the possible, and all of them are within 3 to 5 years, something that we're working on, how would it come to mass market.
Thank you so much, Joakim. I'll go straight to General Mercier. General, I really like having you on the panel because, of course, currently everything we're talking about is dual use. And during the militaries, you are facing the same challenges that everybody here is facing, but you also have the same opportunities. And I really wanted to pick up your brain on a couple issues. First, of course, and we mentioned here that in some areas there's a trend to separate hardware and software. In the military, probably you're going in the opposite direction, trying to make sure that all the hardware has software and how to go about it. But also, if we, for example, look at the issue of we mentioned the space tech and Starlink, it's all been seen on the ground. Can you give us a little bit of your assessment? What do you see as the next most transformative field in the area of technologies that already is impacting battlefields? And I know you spend a lot of time looking into what Ukrainians are doing, but also something that you think we're not paying maybe enough attention to, but will matter even more in the future.
Thank you very much for these questions. And first of all, what Joakim said, I could say exactly the same with military examples, and the challenges are exactly the same. And I will try to explain that. Again, your last questions. There are many technologies that really affect the battlefield today, and it's not tomorrow. It's not in 10 years. It's not in 20 years. This is now. I will mention just a few, and I will focus on one. Our military models have been built to respond to some technologies that have existed for years, but we have a lot of breakthroughs today that really disrupt the models that we have imagined. One of the first things I can mention, for instance, hypervelocity. If we have hypervelocity missiles, it's a huge threat for everything that is a big infrastructure, whether the infrastructure is on land or on the sea. And stopping something that flies at more than Mach 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is something that has to be taken into consideration, and we are not ready to do that. We use more and more space, and with the capacity to have space services. This is true for the civilian sector, but this is true for the military sector as well, with the possibility to send very small satellites, probably with launch on demand, that will considerably change the way we deal with this segment. And I will focus on drones, because drones, and we see that in Ukraine, is really a technology that it's changing really what we are doing and the threats. And you can mention that we have used drones for years. In fact, this is not new, but what is new today is a way to use drones to protect them, to launch them, to swarm them, and to make them more autonomous if it's necessary. And this question of the combination is not a combination of unmanned and manned systems. This is a combination of autonomous and less autonomous systems, and the possibility to team legacy systems, aircraft, ships, and everything with drones, and to work together and to use the systems in order to make the operation is something that is really new today. And what is behind everything, what I said, what is behind is artificial intelligence. We cannot imagine to have a teaming of drones and aircraft and everything without some kind of autonomy in these drones, and this autonomy will be provided by the artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence that we program in order to decide what kind of autonomy it has or not, in fact. But when I say that, what is interesting with artificial intelligence, which is really breakthroughs for me, what is interesting behind that is how we can integrate that already in the legacy systems. We do not have to wait for the future systems. And what I see in my country, and I see that in many countries, we have the tendency to sink the budgets for artificial intelligence in the future systems in 10, 15, 20 years. But no, this is wrong. We can do that today, because that exists today. And as Joakim mentioned, when we launch a satellite, we should think about it, because if this satellite will last for 5 years or more, we need to think that how we will update the AI on board in order to continue to deliver the right services with the pace of the evolution of AI. You know, the Moore's law for AI is the AI is 200,000 times more powerful every 5 years. So that means that how we integrate that in our systems. How we are sure that for the aircraft, the ships, the tanks, and everything we are building, we have the possibility to have a permanent upgrade of the digital systems without touching the hardware itself. And that goes to your first question, Alena, the separation between hardware and software. So far, we define capabilities hardware, and we integrated the software. Today, we have to think them as a software-defined capabilities, and there will still be a hardware, but we need to think about the possibility to upgrade permanently the software in order to keep the pace of these evolutions I just mentioned. And this is something new, but we can start. We do not have to wait again for the future systems. We can start with the legacy system we have and integrate that, and the Ukrainians are doing that very well. And with AI, you can improve your sensors. You can already, even with small cameras, you can. There is a huge GPS jamming in Ukraine, and we can avoid that by navigation by AI, and we can do a lot of things with that. And that exists today. This is not the future. This is not science fiction. And how we integrate that in all of our model. But when we think about it, there is a lot of infrastructure. This is not AI for AI. This is AI for the people, for the sellers, for the airmen, for the soldiers. And you talked about mass adoption. We have this same problem of mass adoption for our people. How our people define what they need, and we find the right solution for them, and the right systems, and improve the systems with AI. This is not AI is just a tool, but the requirements are defined by the people on the ground. And this is why we need to make trials now and to make them understand this technology in order to have this adoption, and in order to be sure that we use it and we do not wait for the future for the future assets. And that's very important. And it's really breakthroughs because again it changes the way we conduct warfare today.
Thank you so much, General. I was told there are microphones in the room, so there's possibility to ask questions. You would need to raise your hand and wave at me to make sure I spot you. And there's also Slido, and I already see questions coming up on Slido. And it's a perfect follow-up on the conversation. Valeriya, I'll probably go back to you, because the question we have on Slido, but also it's a key question that delves into the question, okay, we think about the future, about some innovation that is happening out there, but how do we make it reality today? How did you do it in Ukraine? What did it take? Maybe if you can tell us a little bit of what kind of barriers did you have to smash? Because it's often the excuse that we have in Europe that, okay, they're out there, but we're struggling to adopt them because this and that. Tell us how it's done.
Well, we didn't smash all barriers. We're still in process, I believe. First of all, I would like to comment very briefly on what my colleague said regarding the vision and the strategies and the statement, that there are a lot of those, and what Ukraine can do. You said it's let's make the things or something. Let's make it done. So I just wanted to really emphasize how important is the vision is. Like, why do you innovate? Like, really, why do government has to innovate? Why do organization has to innovate? Why do you need digital transformation? Like, really, why? That's the question. You will not find the answer for these questions in all of those strategies which you've mentioned. And that's basically one of the blocker to the mass adoption of anything. Because for us, again, we are really building the most convenient digital state in the world. We want to be very competitive. We want Ukraine to be a very convenient state to live for Ukrainian citizens and, for our colleagues as well, right? We want to innovate because we cannot afford to lose, and we want to win the aggressor. We have a very concrete vision why we need innovations. And then when you understand why do you need this, it's not just some kind of a conversation about how to be future ready, what is waiting for us in the future, what kinds of innovations, how to make some pilots and say, okay, like we've done some innovations. It's not about that. It's about like really doing innovations on a daily basis, because you have to, and you implement it in your daily life. So I just wanted to briefly comment on that, because this is the topic which is really close to my heart, and I believe that that's one of the things why we are successful, because we know exactly why we need this. And then answering your question about how to overcome bureaucracy. So I think the biggest challenge everywhere is that, for government, is how to balance regulation and innovations. And there are not so much good examples in the world where it really works. There are some, but it's not like the majority. And in our case, for example, when we started, as a ministry, for example, we had a lot of different barriers on legislation side, then on adoption side, on development side, lots of different barriers. But we usually use a very creative approach to that, right? A very good example regarding the defense tech is when the invasion started. You know that our minister is the initiator of the so-called Army of Drones project, and when the invasion started, we had around 7 UAV Ukrainian producers in Ukraine, and we understood that there were a lot of barriers. So the MDT team, together with our colleagues from other ministries, removed barriers. We made the procedure for procurement of drones easier. We made the procedure for exploitation easier. We've created special zones for pilots of drones, and so on. And if in 2022, we had 7 companies, 7 UAV producers. Today, we have more than 300. So basically, we've opened the market, and this is the approach. So when you understand what you exactly want to achieve, when you understand what is your goal and what is your vision, then it's very easy to understand how to use the creative approach to just cancel those barriers. Another very important thing is real cooperation and dialogue between governments and private sector and civil society. Like, the real dialogue is to really deliver from both sides. And it all sounds, like very obvious, but in practice, not so many good examples. And this is where I think we've learned how to do that right.
Your point about why you innovate goes back to the example Joakim was making about pandemic. It was not just about NHS. Suddenly we realized we can actually do everything online, and it became immediately possible. So there is this motivating factor. The mother of innovation is necessity is the mother of innovation, so applies to Europe as well. But Joakim, I'll go to you. I noticed that when you were talking about the frontier technologies that Vodafone is working on, you were talking about 5G. I thought you'd go into 6G or maybe 7G or anything. But can you tell us, like, what prevents you from putting these frontier technologies you're working on into practice right now? And what do you need to get done to make sure we can accelerate the process?
Yeah, so there is nothing in 5G that we don't already have. So we know exactly how to deploy it. We know exactly the technology. We know exactly the vendors. We know exactly everything of it. We know how to architecture it. We have the international standards in place. And that's been in place for quite a time. So there's nothing new. The problem, and it goes to some of the questions here as well, in the sense of, so if this is a no-brainer for what is the need, you need to build an industrial internet, you need to drive industrial productivity and competitiveness, why aren't people doing it? And I think the basic challenge, and that goes to the question, what should government do, and what are the challenges of driving innovation and allowing innovation to take off, lies a lot, in my view, and having spent 20 years in government, in the absence of coherence in government policy and thinking. As a private company, it's quite remarkable that I still have a discussion entirely separate between the national security, economic security, and economic policy. These are 3 different communities. If I'm a telco and I work on SME digitization, I go to one ministry with one set of regulations. And if I work on submarine cables, I go to another ministry with another regulator. And it's not strange, actually, that we got into this situation, because the state, just like private sector, became specialized. And in the presence of becoming specialized, what you do is that you get vertical expertise. And we organized the Industrial Revolution, the old one, on vertical regulation. But the fundamental point around technology and why it's powerful as a disruptor is that it breaks down barriers between sectors. It's an unbelievable tool of cross-pollination, right? Vodafone is the #1 on financial inclusion in Africa. We run a mobile money platform in Africa that is bigger than PayPal, right? Not a lot of people know about it, but it's pretty good. Everyone knows PayPal. Most people wouldn't know M-Pesa, but that's how important it is. That was driven by the convergence of mobile telephony with traditional banking. And it's in the digitization drives convergence between previously separate technologies and or sectors. And that fits very poorly with the state's way of organizing itself for the last 50, 70 years, which is sector bound. So I think, if you look at it from why is Europe struggling on 5G, the fundamental problem is A, it hasn't made up its mind on why does it need it? B, it hasn't accepted that it's falling behind. So the sense of urgency, sense of importance is not 100% clear in everyone's head. C, it hasn't mass mobilized behind it. And by the way, I'm not talking about state capitalism. I'm talking about unleashing private sector investment. Fourth, it hasn't understood that 5G standalone or any new generation of mobile telephony is probably the most capital intensive that comes around. So mobile telephony today is more than twice as capital intensive as a government trying to lay railway, but instead of amortization period of 50 years, it's 7 years amortization. This is a bumblebee that hardly should be able to fly. So unless you have perfect private sector investment commitments and conditions, you're just not going to get it. So not having the audacity to say, I'm not getting an inflow of investment, what do I need to do as the state to pave the way for private capital to be deployed at scale? Frankly, that's lazy. And unfortunately, that's the situation we have. And that's not the magic wand. There's not one thing that improves an investment climate. We all know how complicated it is, especially if you're heavily regulated. You need to actually work through a lot of things. It was wonderful when the European Commission president, after the Ukraine war started, the energy crisis hit Europe, go figure, we realized that we had 7 years of minimum time for getting planning permits for deploying wind parks. I mean, most of the times if you want to deploy a base station in a number of European countries, it takes minimum 2 years. And that's per base station. And a normal country may have 24,000 base stations like we have in Germany. So that's just not the way you deploy technology. So it's down to the most basic stuff, up to the highest level in terms of how you organize investment climate, and then to make sure that it all flows through in a coherent and consistent way, driven by one vision of why it's important and why it's urgent. So I think that what we can, of course, draw up a big map around what is needed, but actually it's doing your homework and ensuring that it all aligns into one objective that is fully understood by everyone who's involved, and is usually cross sectors, it's cross regulators, it's cross ministries. And unless you are able to cajole everyone behind that compass, you will have the right hand is doing something favorable to improve the situation, where the left hand is tripping everyone up in the process. And I think that is part of the problem. And of course, Europe is heavily fragmented between different member states, different sets of regulations. So it's particularly challenging in European context, specifically when we don't have an internal market.
We have about 90 seconds for a rapid fire. General, really going to go back to you. We talked about barriers for innovation and deployment technologies, mostly in civilian sector. In military, usually there are two types of issues that are being pointed out. The first one is procurement, both the speed of it, but also the fact that you have to go on the market and involve the private sector. And the second one is what we can call the new type of challenges. A lot of tech companies say we have issues with how data is collected, how it's shared across border. Name one biggest problem to deployment and absorption of technology in the military sector that you think is paramount.
If I had to name one, because there are many of them, the one is that requires a really partnership between many actors. If we want to deploy the kind of technologies I've talked about, we need obviously to continue to talk with the primes, which are the legacy industries, those who are making aircraft, ships, and everything. But they need to understand that they need to partner with software companies, and there are other companies. There are those companies who are working on command and control systems, who have this big infrastructure, physical infrastructure, digital infrastructures, and we have to bring all of them together. The difficulty we have in Europe is that no one country can have all these systems, and we have to cooperate, but we need to be sure that not all the countries, that all the countries they will agree with the fact that their own companies will cooperate with others, and we will build champions at the European level. At that time, it could work. This partnership could work, in fact, but today it's still difficult because we see many barriers, because we are still very conventional in our thinking.
Valeriya, our time is up, but I really want to go very quickly to you. Also, our participants really curious, what is the one disruptive innovation that you think Ukrainian is missing right now to win? Where do Russians give you the biggest headache right now, and what you think you're trying to improve to win?
Well, I would say that these are related to defense tech questions. So, but we are progressing on all of the sides with regards to this section. So I would definitely not name the biggest challenges, but that's related to defense tech.
Great. Thank you so much, dear panelists, for being here with us. And thank you so much, everybody. Please stay right here, because without the break, we're going to go straight into the next panel. Thank you once again.
Thank you.